this thing that we glorify has been made completely inaccessible to a majority of people. Only the few are able to basically be owners of capital, and we celebrate that as the slaves. Do you get what I'm saying? It's like when they're clapping, we're like, oh my gosh, look at that billionaire.
And then they tell you,
But
even you, if you do it,
even if you do it,
the promise of capitalism is anybody can be a capitalist.
Anybody can be a capitalist.
I've been whitewashed to believe that capitalism is the way I'm going to succeed in life, right? And so I struggle a lot with the thought of the end of capitalism.
Capitalism is irredeemable because capitalism is motivated by being able to make the most with the least, always. And there is no way for you to make the most unless you are exploiting somebody. You can make equitably, but you can't make the most. If you make the most, it is because somebody is making the least. So we are most complicit in the exploitation of labor. And that's a difficult one to swallow because the way we have learned to understand ideas is to judge. We're not able to see things for what they are and to ask, how can this be different? When we see that we are capitalists and we feel that this is wrong, we feel embarrassed and ashamed, so we walk away from the conversation. Then we go to the same media that the capitalist owns to ask for what are options. But they've owned the media. They've already told you Marxism doesn't work. Socialism doesn't work. They've already told you all these ideas. So they don't even let you think of a new thing. I think it's very important that if we're going to fix capitalism, that we understand where we are complicit. It is also capitalism that exploited the natural division of labor, for example, and said what women can do and what men can't do, what men can or can't do. So if we're over there in the factory and now we've taken all the men in the factory, women entered the labor force, for example, because of the war, because men were fighting. So now you need women in the labor force. But you women...
That's even how children entered as well.
Exactly.
Because they'd come with their kids.
Yeah.
Just like, another human.
Yeah, but also think about the amount of orphans. Yeah, but also the amount of orphans that were created. And now they had nobody to fend for them. So they had to just be... The capitalist was like, come, I can be your dad. It's the capitalist that said, okay, now this women labor has entered. We hadn't really anticipated a large scale of women labor in this market. So because we're exploiting, we're just going to charge, we're going to pay you less. And we're going to say, in fact, you guys are meant to be married. Your husband is going to bring the rest of the money. So you don't need to earn the same as a man who's doing the same job. Capitalism is the problem of everything. Capitalism is the problem of everything that is bad in the world, and every single one of us is a capitalist. Currently, at least the three of us on this table.
And it's a global
phenomenon.
Problem.
It's a global problem.
Everywhere is currently capitalist as we speak.
Even places like China, where they ended up saying that they've now made a Chinese capitalism. What are you talking about, a Chinese? Because China initially was communist. Then the guys running the things are like, we're communist to the extent that we are communal, but the profit goes to the state.
Couple of people.
Yeah.
You know, I think one of the things is when you bring it now closer to the individual outside of just the entrepreneurs is, I think as individuals, the way that we have glorified profit over humans, you know, in terms of we glorify the fact that we have, you know, so meaning that before we have a white capitalist, now we're excited that there's a black capitalist. So meaning that we'll glorify Jay-Z, Diddy, but we know that the contracts that they're making the artists sign are exploitive. You know?
They're exploitative.
So, but we don't care. It's like, you know,
black
the
excellence.
guys, they get black excellence, big moves. The guy is rich.
He made a billy.
He made a billy. And you know, the thing is that when you sit back and you recognize that almost less than 0.0001 of people are billionaires, right? In all of humanity, it actually really just paints the picture of, you know, the old days where it's just like, here we have the aristocrats and we're all peasants. Meaning that we've made it so that it's like this thing that we glorify has been made completely inaccessible to a majority of people. Only the few are able to basically be owners of capital, and we celebrate that as the slaves. Do you get what I'm saying? It's like when they're clapping, we're like, oh my gosh, look at that billionaire.
And then they tell you,
But
even you, if you do it,
Even if you do it.
The premise of capitalism is anybody can be a capitalist.
Anybody can be a capitalist, which is true. Because if you're interested in being able to exploit labor, fundamentally, you'll become a very rich person very quickly. Think about the companies like Nike, who basically go and produce these sneakers that you're wearing, but it's on the back of, you think Nike is so innovative and so cool, and they have great media campaigns, but you don't recognize that there's human beings who literally work in a sweat factory somewhere. Think of fast fashion. Think of all these things where we're excited about and we glorify the people who come and produce these things for us, but we don't question how they do it. And we don't recognize that the bedrock of how they're able to build these industries is on the back of human beings. And so I feel like the first thing is just recognizing that when we have a conversation about capitalism, and when we're connecting it to the idea around labor, is to also, sometimes when we talk about labor, we forget that labor is done by human beings. Someone who is a human being. Someone who has ambitions, the same way you have ambitions. I don't understand why you imagine that just because the person who is coming to clean your house is cleaning your house, that you're trying to imagine that person doesn't have ambitions, that they don't have dreams, that blood doesn't course through their veins, that they don't get hurt, that they don't think about how, all this despair in their lives. Do you get what I'm saying? So when we begin to hold on to these capitalist ideas of value, of profit over humans, it's like profit at any cost. Whatever the most important thing is for you to make that money, bro. No. Do you get what I'm saying? That's not it. That's an incomplete statement. Because if we look at it from that sense, then fundamentally you become just like the colonizer. You become just like your oppressor. Because if you are aspiring purely just to make it and you don't care about how, then there's a problem there. Secondly, is that when we think about the fact that even some of the contracts that you go and you sign in the companies that you go and that will come and employ you and give you a wage, right? And where they even tell you things like, any idea that you develop while you're working for me is mine.
Forever, even if you leave me.
Yeah. I mean, that is insane, because basically what you have done is that you have said that this person is not a human being, they're a machine. They're just here to develop things, and then everything, including your brain, belongs to me. And what I've done is that I am paying you this wage. And when you think about, what's so fascinating to me is that when I think about, when we look at the history of capitalism and where it came from, and you look at that and you're just like, how is that any different from now? Where basically what I'm trying to do is I want to own you completely. Forget about the whole thing of that the cottage industry where you have some element of autonomy. I want to kill all autonomy to the extent that any idea that you develop while I am paying you a wage belongs to me. That's insane. And so one of the things that's so beautiful is that I realize is that one of the blessings of coronavirus, right? One of the many blessings, and there are many. Yeah. There are many things that in this time. Let me put it this way in terms of what this thing has brought, right? Is that what has happened is that if you think about feudalism, cottage industry, industrialization, right? And this was kind of like, so the capitalist was a half capitalist in the cottage industry, right? So he had some element of telling you, my guy, make for me cotton, right? So he's like, okay, you're like, okay, cool. If I want this guy's coins, I'll make him cotton, but I can also make my own other stuff. I have autonomy. One thing that is so interesting is that when you think about like fundamentally how a core part of when capitalism was at its highest was them not just owning labor, it was literally owning you. You come here for 18 hours a day and you work for me. I'll give you a short break to go have lunch, but you come back here and you work. If you need to go somewhere, you need to go take care of your child, you come and you ask me for permission to go and do that. I may or may not give you, okay? And there may maybe a few times when I'll give you rest, right? And the thing that is so fascinating to me is that what the virus has done is that it's kind of taken us it's like this is the place where we all operated in and we were okay with it, right? Because these guys are the owners of knowledge in terms of the media and all that stuff to tell us, work hard, hustle hard. You need to work as, how hard are you working? All those things. Yes, employment rates are going up, and like the whole philosophy of in terms of there's no separation between work and life. The work-life balance is a myth. Okay. When you think about how that was the format that we all existed in for as long as we know, right? In this generation. And we've existed in this, and we've been told that this is the only way that labor works. How will you know that your guys are working if they're not in the office?
Supervising.
If you're not supervising them in the office, right? So then now this whole thing has happened where everyone has been forced to stay at home. So if you want to do this work thing, you work from home. Isn't it interesting how it's like literally that shift has moved back into that cottage industry format where there's a level of autonomy. Your supervisor is not in your house.
No.
The people are now in charge.
The people are now you now, and basically we still haven't solved the full problem, right? But when you think about the irony,
there's another way.
There's another way.
That's the main thing.
And that's the thing. And I think when people and this is why I brought this up, is because it's important for guys to realize that this format of where people are working from home is not new.
No. This is actually the original format
This
of
is
work.
not new. This is actually this idea of people not lording over your time, because fundamentally you're a human being. There's no other person that can come and say that because I'm paying you a wage, that's what you call wage slavery. I own your time. How?
So that concept, I think, is very important. Remember, to correlate with Podgy's point from earlier of alienation. Because what it does, first we've become alienated from our labor, you're alienated from the product, and then you're alienated from each other. So even when we're in the workplace, first to even get into the workplace, there's X number of jobs for X number of people who need the jobs. Step one. So in the example of your house cleaner, there are X number of house cleaners and only you who is willing to give the job. So already there's a disparity there. So it means that this cleaner and the next cleaner and the next cleaner become competition. So when we're competition, we're alienated from one another. Your problems are my problems are your problems, but we don't see each other necessarily as being on the same team, because it's like, but if there's only one job over there, only one of us can enter. So this idea of alienation is very, very central. And the thing that has now happened during coronavirus, at least for wage workers, right? We're not even going to speak about the unskilled sector, which I think is very highly skilled. That's a whole other topic. But at least for wage workers, as you go to the office, you've now realized I can work from home. I can manage my mind. I can actually manage how to do this work. The output, when I can put the output, I can actually manage it. Okay? So now this worker is starting to be like, so you've become now less alienated, for example, from your children, who you never used to see, because you're always grinding to get the money to take them to the school that will help your children surpass even you in the class system, right? Because it's always about how far up can we go. So now you're home with your kids. So suddenly like, you get every day we can go for a walk. Okay? But I want also to say, in the same situation, there is a laborer in your home who also has children, but you were like, because of coronavirus, if you leave, you can't come back. So your wage laborer has agreed to stay with you. They have children, they need money, they have children that they would also like to be with, but they accept to stay with you. So even as we are victims and learning new things, we are also perpetuating. And that's why I think it's so important, because now that we have this topic in Kenya called entrepreneurship in all of Africa. But in Kenya, we've come to the conclusion that the economy cannot produce any more jobs. Not at the rate you guys are requiring jobs. So now you guys have to become entrepreneurs. So now you have, and this is very important to UJUAJI, you now have the opportunity. It is like life is offering you the opportunity to now join capitalism of your own will as an entrepreneur. So what is it that you're going to walk into that situation knowing so that you can do things differently?
Can I, I'm just going to verbatim read something.
Please.
Okay, because one of the challenges I have in thought, and this is just probably because of brainwashing. I've been whitewashed to believe that capitalism is the way I'm going to succeed in life, right? And so I struggle a lot with the thought of the end of capitalism? Because for me, is that the end of commerce? Is that the end of trade? Are we starting a new like the concept of that, especially when I think that it's a global economy and we are in this mix as one country out of, not even in Africa, just in the entire economy, we're a small pinch. So I've been playing around with the thought of, as opposed to eliminate, how can we switch the tables on capitalism? Because if it's about labor, at that point in 19 or something when they came, they were running out of labor they needed. The way the world somehow works, in 2020, Africa still has the highest population of young people, which means we still have labor. In terms of resources, despite the fact that it's being held by some private individuals, Africa still has a whole lot of resources just sitting here on our continent. If the people, okay, so I'm going to read a thing that Nigerian Tony Elumelu, okay, he's a banker, he's a philanthropist. He's one of these guys who's made it to a B somehow. A good capitalist.
There's no such thing, but keep going.
Okay. And again, this is what I'm saying. I don't know whether we're going for solutions or we are falling into another guy's trap, right? To find it. But he's testing or playing around with a thought called Afri-capitalism. Okay. And he's put a disclaimer. He says it requires effective coordination between businesses, governments, and civil societies. Okay? To do two things. To meet market demands, but also to collate what the human needs are. All right? So in our people, as opposed to my interest to make profit, what are the things we need here from farming? What is the benefit we're looking for? How can the business world, the government, and them come together? And his thought of Afri-capitalism is that it puts Africa and its people. So now these people who are the guys who elect the leaders, and that's a long other story, how you elect, how you choose. But if you as the people who are the center of the economic decision, so it's not profit, it's common good. As a country, what does wildlife mean for us? As an entire country, the people who live next to it, the people away from it, how do we benefit? How does everybody, 40-something million people, benefit from it? Policy A. Number 2, we have land to farm. Is it in our hands? Is it in someone else's hands? How do we get it back? What do we do? How do we make sure the people around are able to farm? And if we are selling to the UK flowers at $5 a bouquet, it means the people in that process should be able to split $5 and not $1. How do we switch the table so that, or rather, is there an opportunity for us to own capitalism? If we decided power to the people, let's change our leaders, let's take back our resources, let's take back power, and then let's go back into this market and win. Would that work?
So, I personally don't think so. So, I want to postulate that capitalism is irredeemable because capitalism is motivated by being able to make the most with the least, always. And there is no way for you to make the most unless you are exploiting somebody. You can make equitably, but you can't make the most. If you make the most, it is because somebody is making the least. Right? So if you think, if you think about that as a principle, and so to me, capitalism is not redeemable. To me, what is more redeemable is to ask what is inherent in human nature. What is inherent in human nature is human beings are creative. Human beings are self-motivated. Human beings are motivated by their own desire for progress. Human beings are naturally cooperative because working together means you can get a lot more done. And if I even observe humans left to their own devices, so if you think about like the circle movement, if you think about traumas, at a very basic level, what is the principle of a trauma is individually, you may or may not make it, but if we pool resources together, we are most likely to get further than our individual thoughts. So I already feel like that's a return to who we were before white people came here and told us who we are. You were already collaborative. You were already operating in cooperation. A number of women have to build a hut. That's not a thing that you can do by yourself. So capitalism says you can do by yourself if you pay Thimba. before it was like, nah, no one is paying Thimba for anything. The three of us, we build Thimba's house, then the three of us build my house, and the three of us build your house. That's how this thing goes. Our Rao is everybody gets a house. By our own labor, by our own creativity, by our own intellect, by our own intuition. So me, I think that the cooperative movement as a business movement is the one that must replace capitalism. And in doing this research, so me, I've been feeling this for a long time, right? I think maybe when our founding company like turned 10, there was just something in my spirit that's like, this doesn't make any sense. How come we, the ones who put the capital and our labor, are more valuable than all the people who put in their actual labor? Our capital must buy labor. There is nothing unless we have labor. So already in my spirit, I just said looking for more equitable ways. And then I found it, worker-owned companies. So there's a very good example. It's in Spain. It's been operating for 60 years. It's one of the biggest and like most useful models to study. It is not without its mistakes, but the principle is, if you come here to work, you're an owner. All workers must not be alien. So we remove this idea of alienating labor from workers and products from workers. And so we say, if you're here, you are an owner. So they have a thing called the General Assembly. Everybody in the business is in the General Assembly. That's where you put up the agenda for what you want to achieve as a company. In the General Assembly, you choose a managing council. So a managing council would operate quite easily comparatively to a board of directors. Their job is like oversight, making sure that an audit function, that's a very big part of a board, right? To help you think about this thing that you're doing and truly, and is this really truly the right thing? That management council then chooses one guy who is the general manager. This general manager's job is to bring the dreams and the desires of the workers to fruition. So them coming to work is a way for them to achieve their goals of life. And their goals of life are to be able to provide for their children, to be able to produce products, to engage in their intellect, to develop, to build, and to stack wealth. That's what your job as a CEO is to make sure that those workers' aspirations are met through their labor, which is this thing called work, right? Then this person has a team that would be, I guess, like senior management team. So that's now called the managing council, right? So like heads of departments form this managing council. But the managing council and the GM can't make decisions until they run them by a thing called the social council. So the social council is the one that it's basically the equivalent of, let's say, a labor movement. The labor movement, right, what Atwoli is meant to be actually doing, not throwing his phone on TV, is asking what are the workers' true desires? What is the social impact? If we say now that the work day is 12 hours, what does this mean for the life of the workers? If we say that now we are going to expand and go to place X, what does this mean about the ethos? So the social council balances out the management council. When we have something we have to vote, everything happens at general council. So in a very real way, the workers decide what they want to do with their life, what this company is meant to be doing, how it's going to fulfill their desires. They each have a vote, and they own the company. Now, Mondragon, it's in Spain. I strongly, UJUAJI, please don't take my word for it. There are some liner notes for this episode. I encourage you to read the liner notes and just to discover this thing, because for me, that's the first time in my adult life I have found an alternative that isn't capitalism. It's asking, how do I build wealth with the people who are bringing the labor? One man, one vote. How do we build a system that says your purpose in life isn't to work? What do you want? We want a societal transformation. We want everybody to be dignified, the dignity of your work. Your work produces a better outcome for your life, for your children, for your children's children. So work becomes a means and not the end. And most importantly, you're not working for the shareholder, which is what is in capitalism. So like if you've ever bought shares in a company, then you go for an AGM. The AGM will have like 200 guys, but there's all these shares that have been bought by absentee shareholders. Companies have just bought shares and shares and shares. They don't care about the day-to-day operations. You guys, I don't know what whatever, the workers of this place, they care about profit. So the way capitalism has been designed, even our businesses are always about the profit, the profit, the profit. In Mondragon, The business is about the humans in the business and what they have desired. Those same humans also want profit. Obviously, they want an accumulation of wealth, but they also want a fair distribution of wealth. In Mondragon, nobody earns more than 9. The highest person, the difference between the lowest person and the highest person is 1:9, right? That's the ratio. So you as the CEO, the maximum you can earn is 9 times of a person who works in your company. Because the idea is you use the job to create wealth and then you use the wage to distribute the wealth. So wealth redistribution through wage, higher wage. So all of us are skilled laborers. We have a university so that we can upskill ourselves and get even more skilled people into this business. Our money, we put it in our bank. Okay? Then we also give ourselves health insurance. So now we also have our own insurance. Mondragon is not without its criticism. But I have found in Mondragon a worker-owned company that works. Bro, they have the 9th biggest bank in Spain. So I'm not talking about some small dummy, like left wing, like feel good. I'm talking about another way of enterprise, because what I think is important to say to your point is commerce is inherent in human nature. We will trade with one another. It is in human nature. So when capitalism ends, it doesn't mean that commerce ends. It doesn't even mean enterprise. The idea of to be entrepreneurial, to be hardworking, to be motivated, to do something, that is inherent in human nature. I'm just saying that capitalism isn't the only answer. So at an entrepreneur level, sisi kama entrepreneur wa 2020 going forward, you need to know that there's another way to do enterprise that is not capitalist. And that is a worker-owned company. That is my feeling.
I think my biggest lesson goes towards the role of the people in electing the state and the role of the state in effecting capitalism. If capitalism is going to change at a macro level, is macro the biggest?
Country level,
at
yes.
a country level, we need to, as the people, own our government.
Absolutely.
We need to own the power that the government has. So the governance of this government and how this government exercises its power needs to be owned by the people. We need to take back our resources.
Perfect.
Okay? So whether it's land, whether it's power of thinking, whether it's education, we need to take back the resources that make us as a people valuable.
Absolutely.
Because right now, as a people, we are just a commodity.
Absolutely.
And if we don't stop to be the commodity, we can't fight this system.
Absolutely.
And then to start to think of the people. I think a fundamental difference you see now with the age that lives is that they care a lot about the next guy. There's a lot of community today that has come, I guess, from...
Or at least longing for community.
Longing for community,
Yeah.
but I think it's also driven by the fact that my guy, I've hustled so much. I've done 10
Yes.
years of this job. How come I'm not fikaing 10 million like this other guy?
How come I'm not Jeff Bezos
How come
yet?
I'm not Jeff Bezos? How come my music game, I'm not fikaing Jay-Z status over here? And it's just because you think you own something, but you're the commodity.
Yeah.
You're here, and that thing is just being used to deliver your wage, but you're essentially not really building or growing because somebody else owns the true value. And so I didn't think capitalism would end up in we need to then rethink the complete how
Everything.
the state functions.
Correct.
So that if the state is going to think about the people, then even how the people think of what the state becomes needs to change.
Absolutely.
But I feel very trapped. I like the idea of worker-owned. I'd like to research that, but I've written here, what does a worker-owned state look like?
That's what
That
I'd
if
like.
the people owned the state and the people decided what the state does to make the people win.
Like those thoughts we were having in our that we would like to about like how like tax like devolution, those kind of thoughts, right? About owning the state, owning the power going back to the people where it has always belonged.
Moving away from the elite few and just
Absolutely.
becoming that 90% of the people think this is the way to go as opposed to 3% of the people.
Nice.
Cool. Let me just give my few thoughts, then we wrap up. I think it's time to wrap up.
It's time
Wrap
to
it
call
up.
it.
I think for me, because it's such a big concept and it's such a huge thing, and it hasn't existed for probably more than 250 years, if you think about from the time that Adam Smith wrote his book, 1776. I think for me, where the thing that has challenged me, especially around this topic, is really when you understand fundamentally that the bedrock of capitalism is really built on the exploitation of humans, not just labor, but the exploitation of humans. I think for all of us who are listening, it's really about being able to restore dignity to labor, and to restore dignity to labor by really looking at that the person who is working is another human being.
Absolutely.
And that's the reason why it's like you do not have a right to be disrespectful to the watchman or to the person that's serving you or any of that because you're of a higher class status, and so for me, that's one of the things that just keeps going through my mind around this, is that even in terms of myself being an entrepreneur, is really thinking through how you value labor through and through, and how you begin to restore and have deep reverence and honor for those who come to build something with you, and to work together with you, and that you can begin to bring dignity to the table, that just because you're the person who started this thing doesn't mean that you have any right to look down on those that you work with or to exploit them. There's an idea that, I think that would be important, is that if we begin to just start from that basis, then we can begin to also, for those who are starting businesses and those who are getting into entrepreneurship, is that from the formation of your organization or the formation of your company, that you begin to think through ways in which that you can begin to bring that honor and dignity and reverence to those whom you will work with. There's a concept that I mentioned called intrapreneurship, which is basically the idea that ideas that are created within your organization belong to everyone. It's not, you can actually begin to create something within an organization, and the organization doesn't own your mind. The organization is a collaborator with you. So meaning that in as much as you may not be able to, which I think like I mentioned, that the ideal is that there's ownership, that format that you talked about in terms of worker owned, but also in for example, in organizations that already exist, where it's just like, as opposed to, there's the whole thing of the highest form of this is everyone owns it. And my compromise would be, as we get there, is being able to even create formats where the benefit of ownership is also conferred, in the sense that how you look at what the company makes is something that is for everyone. It's not just for the shareholders or the few that exist in the organization, so that they can be the ones who are basically making all the chums based on the back of all the people that are working on the project. And so for me, it's just like, when I think about it from that perspective, in terms of, for me specifically, I'm challenged in being able to think through how is it that I can be able to ensure that, one, I operate with the reverence that with those that I work with, but also being able to create policies that demonstrate that, and that it doesn't demonstrate what is the fundamental basis of capitalism, which is the exploitation of human beings.
So you're saying redistribute the wealth of the organization
Completely.
So are we redistributing it through wage? Are we redistributing it through bonuses? So now our company has made 1 billion in profit. Mm-hmm. So what's the theory here?
So the way I'd look at it is the sense that we've made 1 billion in profit and everyone gets to eat that pie. Everyone from the person who cleaned the tables to the person who is the CEO of the company, in terms of, and the thing is, obviously there's ways that you can be able to create the format, whatever it is. But I think the whole idea being that if we're starting from the fundamental basis of, so whatever the format looks like is one. No, but
I think even a fundamental problem we have based on, again, brainwashing is that when we think division of value, we think of money. So when we think of the billion, I would imagine that if this billion was anti-capitalist, that this billion would help us build schools in the community around us, would help us make sure that the people who work for us have better medical care, would help to upskill this employee. So it's not necessarily I got a B, so I divided as a bonus, but if because of this B,
So now
Vihiga County or wherever it is that we are based is a much better place because this year there's been so much revenue that the sewage will now no longer overflow passing our factory, or we don't have to have 17 cars on the road. Now we have 2 really big cars, and then we've reduced pollution. That is value. That for me is value that has been achieved by the entire community and the common good, as opposed to a guy put half a B in his account. So now he has 17 guzzlers on the road, as opposed to we're trying to fix the general good, as opposed to each individual now having the ability to buy cars. Man, it's a long train of thought. There's a lot in it. There's a lot of correlations. And I think even in continuing the thought process, it's correlate this thinking to everything, to the state, to business, to finances, to religion, to your home, to your personal life.
But me, personally, as we are closing, because we are closing, and we're inviting now our UJUAJIs to give us their thoughts. So for sure, we've unpacked what it is and how it got here and how things changed. And we, in this last section, we've been trying to think about what are potential alternatives. My closing remarks are capitalism is not salvageable. It is not solvable. It is not fixable. If my business partner has put in X amount of liquid cash into the business, my partner was putting in this liquid cash to get liquid cash back of value that is commensurate. So my business partner is not going to be down with sharing the 1B that we made. The reason why they put in the 100 million is because they were anticipating a payday of 1 billion. So a capitalist is not reformable. A capitalist only becomes reformable when you're willing to say, this thing cannot be fixed. Next, alternative. Because, for example, companies do that thing for, we're going to make 1 billion and then we're going to give you CSR to make our community better. So we're going to give you 100 million. We've built for you a school. We've put 2 wells. So we are easy. Are we? So I would like to invite UJUAJI. Katika comment section, katika DMs, tumefungua DMs. The DMs are now open. This is a robust discussion. The point wasn't to come to the conclusion today. Today was to help us articulate capitalism and to come to a point for, are there alternatives to this capitalism? Engage with the theory of Afri-capitalist. Engage with the theory of a worker-owned company. Engage with Thimba's theory or a thought process of redistribution of company wealth through material redistribution, through wage and benefits, okay? We are not looking to conclude the conversation as much as to start it with you. Holla at us. We open for ideas and we're going to be out here. Capitalism lazima ishe na ni sisi na nyinyi tutatoa solution mpya. So karibuni UJUAJI, and see you next week on another episode of UJUAJI.
Get it.